Time is a fascinating and universal concept that affects every aspect of our lives, from the way we measure our days to the way we experience the world around us. On this channel, we'll explore from the Reddit real stories, cheating story, relationship advice, confessions, and more, covering everything from the latest research on time perception to the history of calendars and clocks. Join me as we delve into the mysteries of time and uncover the hidden secrets and surprising truths that lie behind this essential part of our existence. We're living in a world where everyone is getting married and divorcing. If you really enjoy our storytelling, feel free to subscribe and become part of the Revolving Time community. Okay, let's start. My husband's turn to hand out the consequences for my affair with his best friend. I used to be married to an amazing man, SDB. After 15 years of marriage, my husband urged me to return to the workforce. Our 2 children were in middle school and we just purchased our dream home, a 5-bedroom contemporary on several acres of lush, secluded land. My first job was near entry level. I didn't have much experience and everything about the business was new to me. Fortunately, one of the company vice presidents, a man named G. He is my husband's best friend. He took a special interest in me. We were almost the same age, and it didn't take long to realize we worked well together. He was good with the technical aspects of the job, and I was a natural with clients. So we formed a partnership that resulted in many years of success. She was married with children about the same age as mine. We had several mutual friends, and for whatever reason we just clicked. It wasn't a sexual attraction, at least not at first. It was more a friendship that grew over the many long months of struggling to build the business. Truthfully, he reminded me a lot of my husband, not quite as good looking, but he was very nice, and during our long days together, we started to flirt. It was at one of our many company-sponsored after-hours get-togethers that G and I found ourselves alone in a booth at the local watering hole, primed with a few drinks. We admitted to a mutual attraction. 15 minutes later, we're in the parking lot, sitting in my car and making out like a couple of teenagers. The next week was Christmas and lots of after-work parties. One night we took advantage of the festivities to sneak away to a nearby motel. It was a little awkward at first, being in a hotel room with someone other than our spouses, so we fumbled around a bit before relaxing into a long, deep kiss. Things progressed nicely after that, and before long we'd stripped each other and slid under the covers. Damn, for the first time in my life. Then one day we checked into a luxury hotel for the first of our many business trips together. On the second night of a 3-night stay, we left the convention hall and decided to grab dinner in one of the several upscale restaurants that dotted the hotel's courtyard. Everything about the trip had gone even better than we hoped, and we wanted nothing more than to relax and have some food and drink, not necessarily in that order. No sooner had we sat down than our main client appeared. Another old work friend of my husband's. He was ecstatic about the success of the program so far and wanted to chat endlessly about details that neither he nor I cared about at that moment. But business is business, so we politely listened while we sipped our drinks. By the 3rd round, the alcohol was hitting me hard. I hadn't eaten yet and my head was dizzy from all the talk. Rather than engage in the conversation, I sat in my chair listening to the client and G review the plan for tomorrow night's festivities. As I watched, she handled the client. The next thing I knew, I had slipped my shoe off and my foot had found its way to G's crotch under the table, very gently so as not to be noticed by the client. My toes rubbed against G's once he was fully hard. I gave him an extra stroke or two and then stopped. He glanced over at me and I offered nothing but a slight promising and slightly drunken smile. I'll give him credit. He never missed a beat with a client. Later, after an excruciatingly long meal, we rode up the elevator together. He looked at me and in a questioning voice said, "So that was interesting." I smiled and didn't reply. When the elevator got to my floor, I walked off and just before the doors closed on him, I turned and set my room 15 minutes. My batteries were quicker to recharge, so after a few minutes I got up, poured us each a glass of wine from the minibar and brought them over to the bed. She leaned on one elbow while he slipped. I sat propped up against the headboard with my knees pulled up and parted, just enough to allow him a direct view of my well-trained pee-hole night. We do a lot of things like teenagers. The following morning we upgraded ourselves to first class and flew home to rejoin our families and return to normal life. Normal didn't last, though. Like I said earlier, It was just the first of many, many business trips. Update GA. We have just finished their morning F session without a thought for their faithful spouses returning back to the real world after spending 3 nights together. Karma arrives after their morning F session. The happy, guiltless couple walked hand in hand to the elevator and exchanged one last hug before leaving their alternate world in their other life. They became loving spouses. The perfect husband and wife who gave all their love, body and soul to their partners. They rejoiced, knowing how generous they were by giving themselves so freely and completely to their spouses. They enjoyed knowing that this alternative world would never overlap with their faithful life at home. Over the last year, they developed an alternate state of mind which allowed them to enjoy their affair without guilt or thoughts of their family. After all, they deserved each other and were too smart to allow this alternate reality to become part of their real world and loving family life. They had become true narcissists, never caring about the feelings of others or worrying about the consequences while separated from their everyday lives. As the elevator doors closed, they let go of each other's hands. Descending into the lobby, they felt themselves returning to their other reality as thoughts of their children and partners re-entered their minds. Life was great and always better. After spending time with their work spouse in their make-believe world as they stepped off the elevator and headed towards the front desk, they were approached by 2 well-dressed men, stopping them in the middle of the lobby. GC. The older man asked a second later. The younger man standing in front of us asked Stacy Jones. Both stood there, confused, nodding and answering yes at the same time. The men handed each of them a thick manila envelope and said, "You've been served." As NG stood there, shocked as they watched as the 2 men quietly walked away, leaving them speechless as she opened her envelope and signed the words divorce decree. Tears came to her eyes while Jim opened his envelope and found his own divorce documents. Both sets of documents listed adultery as the reason for the divorce. Realizing they were still standing in the middle of the lobby, they quickly walked over to a nearby couch and pulled out the rest of the paperwork as sobbed as she felt her alternate world suddenly collide with the real world. She was angry at first and couldn't believe this was happening. No tears came to his eyes, but then a feeling of horror gripped him at the thought of losing his wife and children as his own alternate world collided with the real world. This should never have happened. These 2 worlds were never supposed to collide. S was incoherent and just cried out, "Oh my God. He can't do this. He can't leave me. I love him as is my life and the only man I love. He has to know that this was just sex and some fun, but how am I going to explain that? Oh my God. How could I have been this stupid?" Then she saw the envelope addressed to her and slowly took it out with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her face as she took out the folded paper. And that's when his wedding ring fell onto her lap, making her gasp. She felt more pain at that moment than any other time in her life. She cried out, "How could this be happening?" She also pulled out an envelope containing a dozen photos of their debauchery and their affair. The photos were clear and incriminating. He knew he was screwed and that his wife would have his balls on a platter for this. Slowly, they both realized they had betrayed their spouses in the worst possible way, and they felt lower than whale shit for the first time since the affair began. And now they realized that their alternate world did collide and that their actions might actually have consequences. While they sat in shock, G showed her some of the photos. She stared at them, wide-eyed, realizing how their affair would affect her life. For the first time, she started to understand the pain that must have felt when he saw them making love in those photos. She was devastated because she knew she had hurt her wonderful husband, for the first time since her affair. She was thinking about Stevie and her pain and guilt overwhelmed her. The tears and her sobbing now drew the stares of others in the lobby. When her tears finally calmed, she read his letter. "Stacy, your betrayal, lies, and deceit were the most painful things I've ever experienced. The loss of my mother was hard and sad, but it pales in comparison to the pain you caused in my soul. The way you so easily lied to me on set was cruel. When you left the next morning without saying goodbye or giving me your usual kiss, I knew you didn't love or need me anymore. The children haven't stopped crying, and your parents are inconsolable. When I dropped them off at your mom's house, they saw me crying. They're such loving people, and they tried to console me while I told them how you have fallen in love with Gia. Only wish I knew. What made you give your love to another man? I would have moved heaven and earth to prevent that, and save our marriage and your love. If only you had been honest with me. I would have done anything to save us. Because I loved you that much. When I discovered you were in love with my best friend, somehow the pain and betrayal became even more painful. Since the day I found out about this, I have become a broken man full of self-doubt. Knowing our marriage is over, I plan to rebuild my confidence and find a good woman to love and cherish. One who will be faithful to me and not betray me as you have done so callously. When you come home, you'll see that I've moved out and the girls are at your parents' house. I put our house on the market, hoping that it will sell quickly. You can have everything left in the house because I don't want anything to remind me of you and your contempt for me in our marriage. I hope you find what you're looking for in another man, and perhaps it will be with your lover. My ex, Jahi too, will be moving on once his divorce is final. I handled our divorce fairly and will have joint custody of the girls. Please just sign the divorce papers and don't fight this. I cannot have you in my life any longer because my heart can't bear to see you and experience the hurt you have generously dumped on me. I still love you, and that has made this so much more difficult. I wish I could hate you, but maybe that will come with time. You can contact me through my attorney, but please don't call or text. I won't speak to you again. Goodbye. Steve. Stacy's new reality. That was the moment when my mind snapped back to reality and everything became clear. It took that letter from my husband to make me realize that I had been a selfish, a cheating woman I loathed if it were anyone else. He thinks I love Jackie, but no, I never loved him. He can't believe that I have to let him know he's the only man I want. It was clear that there was no alternate world, and I was just another cheating wife who thought she was smart and deserved whatever she wanted with no regard for my wonderful husband and children. A middle-aged fool who needed some excitement which may have ended my wonderful marriage. I remember how I lied to Stevie that day and never even felt guilty. I was so self-centered and only cared about myself and hurt him in the worst way. How did I let this happen? I needed to fix this, but I have no idea how to even start. Hell, I lied to his face and cheated on him for so long. How can I convince him to forgive me? What a fool I've been. He has to talk to me and I need to see him. If nothing else, he has to know that he's the only man I love. I looked over at the man of my undoing and in a sad voice said I made a big mistake, and I may have lost only man I ever loved. I hate myself for what I did, and I need to fix this. You and I are over, and we can never be together again. I'm leaving now. Please take your own cab to the airport. I need to be alone and figure things out. What are you going to do? I don't know. She already kicked me out and changed the door locks. I'll have to find a place to stay and beg her to forgive me.